So you've heard of doing things by the book, right? People talk about that. Well, I'm going to talk to you about bus driving by the Bible tonight, or bus driving by the book. And you're probably going to wonder, what in the world does the Bible have to say about bus driving? And the answer is nothing about bus driving specifically, but there's a lot of principles here that I can talk about, and I plan to. So what I want to do is I want to give you a biblical perspective on my new part-time job. It's actually nearly full-time. It's like 32 hours, but by the time I run back and forth there twice, and all, it's like 37 hours. So anyway, though, it works for me for now and gives me some time in the middle to get some studying done, and so I'm thankful for the job. So my reason for doing this is that I'm supposed to be an example to the flock, and so I've decided to share these things from my personal life just to give you an example, I guess, of some biblical principles in my life. So if you look in 1 Timothy 4 and verse 12, Paul tells this young preacher, Timothy, to let no man despise thy youth, but be thou an example of the believers in word, in conversation, in charity, in spirit, in faith, in purity. So the preacher's supposed to be an example, which is a sober task if you think about it. If you got to be an example for other people, that puts a lot of weight on your shoulders. And Peter likewise said in 1 Peter 5 and verse 3 that the elders are supposed to be ensamples, which is an old word that means examples, to the flock. He says in verse 2, 1 Peter 5:2, feed the flock of God which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but of a ready mind, neither as being lords over God's heritage, but being ensamples to the flock. So the preachers aren't supposed to just be running roughshod over the congregation, making up a bunch of rules and telling people what to do and all that. We're supposed to more be examples, so show you how to live the way the Bible says. So I've broken this down into about 4 different areas that I want to look at. I want to talk about, first of all, providing for myself and my wife. That's part of this. Then I want to talk about doing my job with all my might as unto the Lord and not unto men. Then I want to talk about how I can philosophically drive a school bus when I'm philosophically opposed to government schools. So how does that work? How can you work for something that you're opposed to? And then I want to talk about managing and controlling students and some things I've learned there. So first of all, providing for myself and my wife. So normally speaking, pastors are supposed to be able to live off the financial support of their church. 1 Corinthians 9 and verse 14. But, let me just jump ahead. This is not an indictment of this church, and I will get to that. So don't think there's no condemnation here whatsoever, and I will cover that. I just wanted to say that before I get to this. 1 Corinthians 9 and verse 14. I'm just going to give you one verse. You're well aware of these things, and I've preached on this before. Paul said in 1 Corinthians 9:14, even so, the Lord ordained that they which preach the gospel should live of the gospel. So typically, when you have a church of a decent size, then the preacher's job is to preach, and the congregation would supply for him financially so that he can supply for them spiritually. And that's typically how it would work if the church is, of sufficient size. But sometimes pastors do have to work a secular job to supplement their ministerial income. And the Apostle Paul is an example of that in Acts chapter 18 and verse 3. I'll give you a few examples in Paul's life of this. Acts 18 and verse 3. He meets up here with Priscilla and Aquila, his friends and helpers in Christ. And it says there in verse 3, and because he was of the same craft, he abode with them and wrought, which means worked, for by their occupation they were tent makers. So he meets up with them, and since he was a tent maker and they were tent makers, they got together and made some tents because he needed to supply for some material needs of his own. And he also did it for others that were with him as well. In Acts 20 and verse 34, Acts 20 and verse 34, he's talking here to the elders at Ephesus, in this church that he had built and then ordained elders to fill the needs of the church. He says, yea, ye yourselves know that these hands have ministered unto my necessities and to them that were with me. So he's saying that, hey, well, he says before that, I've coveted no man's silver, right? Paul was not in it for the money. And he says, and I can prove to you I'm not in it for the money because my own hands have worked to provide for my needs and the needs of those that are with me. And then give you one more, 1 Corinthians 4 and verse 12. 1 Corinthians 4 and verse 12. People can say a lot of bad things about me, but I don't think one thing that anybody that knows me could say is that I'm in it for the money. I don't think anybody would accuse me of that. They accuse me of a lot of stuff, but not that. 1 Corinthians 4 and verse 12. Paul says he's just giving a list of things that he is an apostle endure. And he says, in labor, working with our own hands, being reviled we bless, being persecuted we suffer it. So Paul was not afraid to get his hands dirty. He was not afraid to work. He wasn't sitting back with, a Learjet, flying around the country. Obviously, that wouldn't have happened in those days. But he wasn't living a life of ease, right? He was working and not afraid to do so when he needed to. And there was a point in his ministry when he voluntarily worked, when he might not have even needed to, but he did it to prove a point, as an example to lazy people that were not working when they could. So there's a difference between people that can't work and people that won't work. And Paul had a church here, which otherwise was a good church in Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, but they did have a problem here with some people that were busybodies, just not working, running around and getting themselves into trouble. Idle hands are the devil's workshop, as they say. So Paul here, as an example to them, worked with his own hands to give them an example of how you're supposed to be diligent, not slothful. In 2 Thessalonians 3, 7 through 12. And that's not why I'm working, by the way, or something, because I think you're all a bunch of sloths. No, that's not why. But I will get into the fact that I am happy for the opportunity to be an example to people inside the church or outside the church, people that I meet or whatever. It is a good opportunity for me. But anyway, 2 Thessalonians, I'm going to read verses 7 through 12. He says, for yourselves know how ye ought to follow us, for we behave not ourselves disorderly among you, neither did we eat any man's bread for naught, but wrought with labor and travail night and day, that we might not be chargeable to any of you, not because we have not power, but to make ourselves an ensample unto you to follow us. So he had power to take financial support from them. He could have reasonably asked for that, but he didn't. He went that so that he could be an example. And here's the reason, verse 10. For even when we were with you, this we commanded you, that if any would not cannot, but would not work, neither should he eat. For we hear that there are some which walk among you disorderly, not working at all, but are busybodies. Now them that are such we command and exhort by our Lord Jesus Christ, that with quietness they work and eat their own bread. So Paul here, he could have just by the word of the Lord said, hey, you need to be working, you need to be providing for yourself, you need to be taking care of yourself. And that would have been fine. He could have done that. But you know what? When people perceive the guy that's telling you that isn't really working a real job like you are, maybe he's just studying the Bible, and that's not work after all, which some people might think, it would carry a lot more weight with it when Paul is paying his own way, he's working, and then he says, now you lazy bums need to get to work. If you're not working, you don't eat, right? So he did it to prove a point. So I am thankful for the opportunity to work a secular job for a time, and hopefully it's not forever, so that I can be an example to others both within and without the church of how a man should provide for himself and his wife. Because it says in 1 Timothy 5 and verse 8 that if any man provide not for his own, especially for they of his own household, he's worse than an infidel. So all of my preaching is meaningless if I'm not providing for myself and my own, right? 1 Timothy 5 and verse 8, but if any provide not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. So, that's a high crime to not provide for yourself and your own. So, like I said, I jumped ahead because I didn't want you to think that I was condemning anybody in this church, because I am not. My working a secular job is not an indictment of this church. The members of this church support me generously, regularly, and consistently. And I can say that about all of you very honestly. You all do a wonderful job. It's just a matter of numbers, that's all. It's just the size of the church. When you got a church of 10 people, 2 of which are the pastor and his wife, it's pretty hard for somebody, for 2 people to live on the support of a church of that size. And I know that all of you, several of you have mentioned it to me, that you lament the fact that I have to work another job. And that's commendable on your part. There have been churches out there that pretty much didn't support their pastors at all. And by the way, they're not churches anymore, but I'm not talking about Minneapolis, but did not support their church or their pastor at all, and couldn't have cared less if he was out there working another job or whatever. But that certainly is not true of any of you. A church of our size and circumstances is not able to fully support even a frugal pastor and his wife. And you know me, I am frugal. And, we try to get by on as little as we can. But in this case, I just had to make a little bit more to make the ends meet. And there's nothing wrong with that. So if it's God's will, he'll add members to the body, and it will enable me to once again dedicate myself full-time to the work of the ministry. And that's what my hope is. Not that I don't mind driving the school bus. It's a job like any other job. But I'd rather not have to do it, even though there's been things that I've learned, and I think it's been a good experience in some ways. But I'd rather be doing the work that God's called me to do in the ministry, of course, full-time. So until then, I'm just going to continue my secular job and provide for my wife and myself. So secondly, I want to talk about doing my job with all my might, as unto the Lord and not unto men. Because once again, if I, as a pastor, and there's nothing wrong with this, but if I was if I am a pastor, and if I was just doing the work of the ministry, and then I'm lecturing you how you should do your job as unto the Lord, and you could think, well, easy for you to say, you are actually doing your job for the Lord, right? For his people, for the church. And so it's easy for you to tell us to do it as if we're doing it to the Lord, because, you don't really exactly have a boss, or an employer that you're working for or something. So this could be a good example, too, where I can be there in the trenches with you. Colossians 3 and verse 23. Colossians 3:23. Paul says, "And whatsoever you do, do it heartily," with your heart, with your fervor, with your soul. "Do it heartily as unto the Lord and not unto men." And that's a good reminder for all of us, no matter if you're a housewife or if you work for an employer or what you do it as if you're doing it to the Lord. And just think about that. And it's funny, I kid you not. I was sweeping out my bus after my run today, and I got it all swept up, and then I happened to see underneath one of the seats, and there was a little piece of a wrapper, and I just didn't feel like going and picking it up. And then I literally thought, do it as unto the Lord. And I went and picked up the little wrapper and put it in the garbage can, So do your job as unto the Lord, like he's watching, because he is. Ephesians 6, 5 through 8. Ephesians 6, 5 through 8. Servants, which is what I am, which is what anybody is that works for an employer. We are a servant. Servants, be obedient to them that are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling, in singleness of your heart, as unto Christ, not with eye service as men pleasers, but as the servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, with good will doing service as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that whatsoever good thing any man doeth, the same shall he receive of the Lord, whether he be bond or free. So the Lord sees it all, and your employer might not even see it, but the Lord sees it, and he putteth up one, and he setteth up one and putteth down another. Right? Promotion cometh not from the east or from the west or from the south, but the Lord is judge. He setteth up one and putteth down another. Psalm 75, I think it is.
I've got a question.
Yes.
Well, what about with housewives? Like, who are considered, or who's considered their master, or do we have a master? I've just thought about that.
Well, your husband would be, and the Lord, of course. But, yeah.
But even people that own their own business are servants, because
To customers.
if you don't please your customer, you're out of business.
That's right.
So they're kind of like your masters.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, customers are a lot more of
Demanding than an employer.
demanding than them. Yeah, that's right.
That verse 8 now, I know you said before, but what is that, whether he be bond or free? free? What's the bond or free?
Whether he's a servant, so the servant would be the one that's in bonds. Yeah.
Okay.
So either way, whether you're a
It's
servant
not
or...
like he's jailed, it's like he's fulfilling a commitment or he's
Yeah.
owned or what?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Austin, yeah. Something?
I was just thinking, when you own your own company, though, I mean, for one, yes, you're employed by the customer, but for two, it's not easier than being an employee, I don't think, because your boss is the customer and you are responsible for your employees, you know, and you got to take care of them.
Oh, yeah.
You know, or you won't have any.
Right.
They'll be gone.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to have good employees, you've got to be a good boss.
Yeah, that's right.
There's no other way.
Yeah.
And that's not an easy job.
Yeah. I'm sure if you talk to anybody that has owned their own business, they'd tell you being an employee is a cakewalk compared to owning your own business.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never owned my own business other than a couple of failed attempts at internet businesses. But other than that, and even that I can tell you that wasn't not easy. But owning, my mom was a business owner, her my stepdad, and I saw enough in their lives to know that it's no cakewalk. That's for sure. So I try to do my best on the job, try to do my job right and not to cut corners. Like Paul said in Romans 12 and verse 11. I don't want to dwell on any of these things too long because I do actually have quite a bit of stuff to cover. You'd be amazed at how much bus driving information there is in the Bible. But Romans 12 and verse 11. Paul says, not slothful in business, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord. So whatever your business is, whatever you're doing, do it fervently, like you're zealous and on fire for it. Solomon said in Ecclesiastes 9:10 that whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might. For there is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave whither thou goest. One of these days you're going to go into permanent retirement, like death. And until that time, Solomon says, whatever you're doing, do it with all your might, because once you get to death, you can't do any more work anymore. And God's got lots of stuff for us to do, so do it heartily. I show up early, I inspect my bus, I leave the lot at precisely the right departure time every day. I watch that clock, it strikes 6 o'clock, and I'm pulling out of that lot. Every single day, not a minute late. Yet, anyway. I'm sure one of these days something will happen, but haven't been a minute late yet. I try to do my job right even when it irritates students and parents and makes my work more difficult. Because it's easier just to kind of go along to get along. And like in my job where you're supposed to pick up at designated stops. And students like courtesy stops right in front of their house. And a lot of drivers, some drivers anyway, will do that. But we're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to pick up at the stop. So they get mad when a new driver comes in and says, hey, I'm picking you up down the street now, not here. And then the parents get mad, but I just do it. Whatever they tell me to do, I just do it. And then if they catch flack from the parents and they change the route, then I'll do that. But I do whatever they tell me to do. I'm also thankful to have a less prestigious job, because in a time in my life I did have a more prestigious job. And I'm glad to have a less prestigious job because it does give me the opportunity to show an example to people that there is no job that is beneath you, right? So because some people think that there's just certain jobs that you shouldn't take because that you're too dignified for that. Proverbs 14 and verse 23 says, Proverbs 14:23, in all labor there is profit, but the talk of the lips tendeth only to penury. Talk is cheap, as they say. But it says in all labor there's profit. So there's no such thing as a demeaning job. As long as the job, you're not sinning by doing the job. If you're a prostitute or something, then that's a job that's beneath you, right? If you're a hitman, that's a job that's beneath you. But if you are working and providing for yourself, there's no job that's beneath you. Now, if you can get a better job and make more money, it makes sense. Use your talents and abilities to the best that you can. It doesn't make sense for a rocket scientist to go work at McDonald's just for the fun of it or whatever. Do what God, if God's given you a talent, use it. Now, you could turn that back on me and say, well, then why aren't you doing engineering? The main reason I'm not doing engineering is because I'd have to work full time, which would be more than I'm working now, and the hours would be 8 to 5, and I'd have no time for my wife at all. I'd have it just wouldn't work. So this works. The schedule works, and it gives me enough money to meet my needs. Next, how can I drive a bus if I'm philosophically opposed to government schools? Right? And this is my personal thing, so I'm not casting aspersions on anybody that goes to government schools. I went to one myself when I was a kid, but this is my personal conviction. I don't think there should even be government schools, right? I think that there should be either homeschooling or private schools in the private sector where people voluntarily go and they contribute and they pay for them, and that the government shouldn't be robbing people of their, robbing people through property tax to pay for other kids, to go to school. I mean, it's an immoral, it's an ungodly system in that sense anyway. But, so how can I work for such a system then? And the answer is that we're allowed to use the world but not abuse the world. 1 Corinthians 7 and verse 31. 1 Corinthians 7 and verse 31. And that'll give you just a couple of examples of men that did that very thing. 1 Corinthians 7:31. It says, "And they that use this world as not abusing it, for the fashion of this world passeth away." So we can use the world. There's nothing wrong with that. We just don't abuse or misuse this world. So you got to live in this world. And yeah, I could go get a job somewhere totally in the private sector, and that'd be fine too. But there's nothing wrong with work. And I don't directly work for the government, but I indirectly work for the local government anyway, I guess you could say. But Jesus taught us to make to ourselves friends of the mammon of unrighteousness, that we can have everlasting habitations whenever we fail. In Luke 16, verse 9, this is the man that was the unjust steward, and his master got irritated with him because he wasn't doing a good job, and he fired him. And the steward says, "What am I going to do?" I think, was this the guy that said he couldn't dig, and to beg he was ashamed? I forget. I don't know if he's... Yeah, this is the guy, yep. He had been... he had wasted his master's goods, and he gets fired, and he says, "Hey, I can't dig, and I'm ashamed to beg, so what am I going to do?" And he decides, here's what I'll do. He says, "Hey, you, how much do you owe?" The guy says, 100 measures of oil. "Sit down and write 50. He says, "Hey, how much do you owe?" 100 measures a week. "Sit down and write 80. You know what he's doing. Like, "How much do you owe?" $100. "Hey, here's your bill. Just cross out that 100 and put 50. Now you only owe 50. You owe 100, cross that out and put 80. Now you only owe my former employer 80. He just gave him a deal, basically. He ripped off his former employee is what he did. Yeah. And it's an interesting parable that Jesus uses there. But he says the children of this world are in their generation wiser than the children of light in verse 8. And then he says, "And I say unto you, make to yourselves friends of the mammon of unrighteousness, that when ye fail, they may receive you into everlasting habitations." Now, Jesus is using a principle here. He's not teaching us to rip people off. That would be unjust. That would be fraud. But he's teaching you, hey, pay attention here. What do the men of this world do? They kind of make backup plans. And make a backup plan. Make a backup plan to fall back on in this world if something happens to you. And that's what I would take from that parable, basically. Not telling you to rip people off, but make a backup plan. And so that's kind of what I'm doing. I got a backup plan. We all know the story of Daniel and Joseph, right? Daniel worked for King Nebuchadnezzar, right? The Babylonian Empire. Joseph worked for the king of Egypt, right? He was high up in the government. These men worked in the belly of the beast, and yet God blessed them for it. So it's not wrong to work for the government. It's not sinful to work for the government. If you don't want to, that's fine. But it's not a matter of a sinful thing. So hopefully by doing this, I can hopefully make a difference in the lives of some children, maybe just one. I don't know, I got to talk to a girl today, a senior, and she, not getting into the details, but her parents wanted her to do one thing, she wants to do another. And I just kind of put in my little tidbit and said, sometimes when you're your age, your parents seem kind of stupid, but then when you get older, you realize that they weren't so stupid. Yeah, I know. And I said, your parents are right about that one. And so just stuff like that, if I can make a difference at all in somebody's life, that would be a good thing. Okay, now, this is going to be the last point, but this is going to be the lion's share of it, and that is managing and controlling students. So, I've preached about biblical child discipline and training, since I've been in the ministry. It's kind of one of my little soapboxes. And I've done so without having children myself, right? And I've even addressed that, that I know that I don't have children myself, and yet I've done quite a bit of teaching on this topic. But now that can't be said anymore, because I have 60 of my own kids now. 60 of them. That's a lot more kids than any of you have. They range in age from 5 to 18. So I've been busy, obviously. So yeah, 60. I've got about 40 of them at a time, high school, middle schoolers, and then 20 elementary kids. And I could tell you some stories. The elementary kids are great. They're fun. They're cute. They're hilarious. I mean, they're really something. The high school, middle school is a different story. They're difficult. But I've found that when I applied biblical principles of authority, child training, and child discipline to managing and controlling 60 children on a school bus, guess what? It worked just like the Bible said it would. It works. Now, you can't specifically apply what the Bible says. You can't beat them with a rod, unfortunately. I wish I could, because I could have gotten them, in ship shape faster. Yes, quicker results. But it still works. You just have to go through more or less effective methods, and it takes more time, but it does work. And basically what I'm going to show you here is what Jesus said in Luke 7:35. He says that wisdom is justified of all her children. Luke 7 and verse 65. Or 7:35. Luke 7:35. He's talking about here people that are implacable, basically. And he says, John the Baptist came eating and drinking wine. You say he has a devil. The Son of Man came not eating and drinking. John the Baptist didn't drink wine or eat bread, and you say he has a devil. Then in verse 34, the Son of Man has come eating and drinking, and ye say, behold, a gluttonous man and a winebibber, a friend of publicans and sinners. You can't appease some people. He says, but wisdom is justified of all her children. Wisdom's children, God's children, justify the wisdom of God. They show how the wisdom of God is just and right. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to show you basically how if you take the principles in the Bible and apply it to child training and discipline, even in a situation like this when they're not my own kids, which in some ways is harder because when they're your own kids, you slap them up, and but when they're not your kids, you can't, right? Exactly. But if you are in a position of authority, then use that position of authority, and you can do it. You can make it work. And I'm going to talk about that. So like I said, some of the methods of child discipline in the Bible, such as beating children with a rod, have to be modified when driving a school bus, because that's not allowed. 70 years ago, yeah, that would have been fine, probably, but not now. Nevertheless, there are still inferior enforcement mechanisms that can be used, which will and do work if they're used consistently, and that's the thing. So these non-biblical methods take longer to apply and to produce results, but they will work when applied regularly and consistently. So even using bad methods or inferior methods, if you still take those inferior methods and then apply what the Bible says about child discipline, it will work. It just takes longer, and I would not recommend these methods as a parent because the Bible tells you how to do it as a parent. But in this case, you got to deal with what you have. So with many parents, teachers, and school bus drivers, children are their oppressors, and this shouldn't be. Look at Isaiah 3 and verse 12. This shouldn't be. It's pretty pitiful that little people drag big people around like they got a ring in their nose or something and make them do their will. That's not how it's supposed to work. Isaiah 3 and verse 12. Isaiah says, the Lord says, as for my people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. O my people, they which lead thee cause thee to err, and destroy the way of thy paths. Children are their oppressors. This is not a new phenomenon, right? It's like history repeating itself. There have been times, apparently this was one of those times, where children were just running wild in Israel's day, and their parents were at their wits' end and not controlling them. But I say children only act unruly, disobediently, and rebelliously if parents and other adults in authority allow them to. They only act that way when parents or authority figures allow them to, and this should not be. So I would say to parents, school bus drivers, teachers, anybody that's in authority over children, establish your authority from day one. The first day that I drove my route, I did so with the former driver along with me so I could learn the route. I didn't know where I was going. And so he was kind of on, I mean, those were still his kids, and they were sort of, they were behaving themselves because he was there pretty well anyway. But before I left the school, I introduced myself to the students, and I read them the bus rules. So the first thing I did, stood up, introduced myself, read them out the rules, and told them I wanted them to follow them, told them that I'll respect you and you respect me, right? And so that kind of set the stage for the rest of the year, really. What I did is, I'm taking a verse out of context here slightly, but in 1 Peter 5 and verse 2, I took the oversight. I didn't ask for it. I took it. 1 Peter 5 and verse 2. He says, this is actually applies to me in my pastoral work, but I use the principle in my bus driving work. Feed the flock of God which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but of a ready mind. And that's true. I didn't take the bus driving job for filthy lucre either, because it doesn't pay all that well. So anyway, introduce myself, let them know the rules. And this is important for parents too. Establish the rules. Let your kids know these are the rules, and if you break these rules, you're going to pay. But once you take the oversight, guess what? The students will try to take it back because they don't want you to have the oversight. Children don't want you to have the oversight. They want to oversee themselves. And you know what happens when the inmates are watching over the asylum, right? It's a madhouse. Can't let that happen. So those in authority, parents, grandparents, teachers, pastors, bus drivers, must not allow them to do it. So the first day that I drove my route alone without another driver or monitor on board, the children immediately began to test me. There's a shocker, right? For a couple days, they sent a monitor along with me. And I just couldn't wait. She's a nice lady, but I couldn't wait to get her off the bus because she was just yap, 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 and the kids aren't really paying attention to her. And I just thought, get her off of here. I just want to do this myself. Because I didn't say anything to the kids when she was on the bus. I just thought, get her out of here. I'm going to take care of this. So the first battle ensued, which would decide who was in control of this bus, me or the children, because they're going to test you, and it's going to be on the first day. And sure enough, the first day I was on there by myself, it's a madhouse, right? Totally different than the days before that. But they had another thought coming. That wasn't going to happen. They're sitting there with their legs and their bodies in the aisle, and they're all full of mirth and figuring out that they're going to be able to walk all over this new bus driver. But it wasn't going to happen. I put an end to that right away. As soon as I got out of town, I pulled the bus over. I got to a place where I could stop safely. I secured it. I shut it down so it was nice and quiet. And then I walked slowly down that aisle between them. I kid you not, you could hear a pin drop. Literally dead silent. I don't think they knew what to make of it. I just walked back there really slowly and just stared at them all. And then I started asking them, why is the rule to keep your bodies out of the aisle? Why do we have that rule, your legs and such? They said, well, so people don't trip. Yeah, that's true. And so I forget what the other answers were. I said, yeah, that's true. But also, if I hit the brakes, you're going to go flying if you're in the aisle. And if I have to keep looking up at you and I run into somebody, then you're really going to go flying and you're going to get hurt. And nobody wants that. So, once I set the stage there, this pretty much set the stage for the rest of the year on the bus route. Like, that was pretty much what it took. I mean, there's all, it was like the big battle was won and then there's little skirmishes after that. But that pretty well set the stage. Like things are not going to be the way that they thought they were going to be on the first day. The Bible says, correct thy son and he shall give thee rest. Look at Proverbs 29 and verse 17. Proverbs 29 and verse 17. Yeah, of course, you're always going to have trouble with kids, and it's not like you establish your authority and they're never going to buck it again. They will, but they know ultimately who's in charge, and they know unless you capitulate, it's not going to go well. I mean, they're not going to get away with it. They test once in a while just to see if you change your mind, and then when they find out you haven't changed your mind, then they stop for a while. Proverbs 29 and verse 17. It says, correct thy son, and he shall give thee rest. Yea, he shall give delight unto thy soul. And it says in Hebrews 12 and verse 11 that when chastisement happens from a father to a son, it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness. So when you correct your children, whether they're your own or on the school bus or in the classroom, you will have rest and peace. And I have a very calm, quiet bus. Now, I really do. I mean, the kids talk a little bit. Maybe a lot of it is on their devices or what, but it's not loud. They're not jumping around. They're not, the most trouble I have is they want to get in the aisles once in a while because they want to talk to somebody or look over the next seat at something somebody has. And that's all I've got. That's the only issues I have at all. I mean, that's the only thing I have to deal with. It's calm, it's quiet, it's peaceful, it's nice. I rarely need to raise my voice. I only need to look at the students in the passenger mirror. Literally, I just need to look at them. If I can make eye contact with them, that's usually all it takes. Because they know what's going to happen if they don't listen to me. They are going to be punished. I'll get into that in just a second. Proverbs 20 and verse 8. This is a neat verse. I've never used this verse before when it comes to this topic, but this is a good one. Proverbs 20 and verse 8. All I have to do is look at them. A king that sitteth in the throne of judgment scattereth away all evil with his eyes. I'm the king of the school bus, right? I look in the rearview mirror and I scatter away evil with my eyes. Literally, all I have to do is look at them. It's amazing. I look at them and all of a sudden they get back in their seat. It's amazing. If that doesn't work, I give them hand signals to sit down or get out of the aisle. And that usually is all I need. If I can get their attention, if I can make eye contact with them, I just look at them. And they're over there, man. Right away. I only usually have to yell if I can't get their attention, if they're not paying attention or something, and then I have to get their attention. So I have very peaceful trips each day. I enjoy driving the students. For the most part, once in a while they irritate me, but for the most part it's not bad at all. Some other drivers complain about how bad their students are on the bus and how they can't control them. But their students only behave badly because they allow them to behave badly. Mm-hmm. I've ridden with other drivers. It's just students playing this terrible music, like with horrible lyrics, and they just let them do whatever they want. Not me. As a bus driver or a parent or a teacher, you must resolve from the beginning that you will win a confrontation with a rebellious child. You must win. And that's what I've determined, that I will win. I don't care how bad that kid is, because I have methods that I can use. I can't physically touch him, but I have methods, and I will win. Mark my words. It's just a matter of just having stamina and keep writing him up, and he's off the bus. I will win. And parents can do the same thing. Some children are a lot harder than others. Some of them are strong-willed, some of them are hard-headed, but you have to win. You must never give up and let the child do what he wants. It takes determination, strength, courage, and stamina, but it can be done. Solomon said in Ecclesiastes 7 and verse 8, better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof. Beginning's rough, right? Beginning when you're training children is rough. When you're driving a bus is rough. When you're a teacher, it's rough. But if you do it right, the end will be blessed. The end will be a lot better than the beginning. You will eventually reap what you sow, whether it's good or bad. And Paul taught that in Galatians chapter 6, 7 through 8. If you sow good things, and you sow discipline and authority, you will reap a well-behaved child. If you don't, and if you let your child do whatever he wants, you're going to reap a sad harvest. Galatians 6, 7 through 8. It says, be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. For he that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption, but he that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. Using the principle here. Next, the Bible teaches us to chasten children betimes, which means early. This is really important. Proverbs 13 and verse 24. Because if you let it go for a while, on a school bus, and you figure, well, I'm going to learn the route, and then I'll kind of start getting them under control in a week or two. No way. You're going to lose control of them, and it's going to be really hard to get it back. Proverbs 13 and verse 24. It says, he that spareth his rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him betimes. Betimes is at an early time, period, or season, early in the year, early in life. Early in the year. Early in the school year. Chasten your children betimes, early in the school year, and it'll go well for you. Correct bad behavior immediately. If I would not have chastened my students early and often, they would have been my calamity, and I would have been brought to shame. Proverbs 19 and verse 13. See, you didn't think the Bible had so much to say about school bus driving, did you? Proverbs 19 and verse 13. A foolish son is the calamity of his father, and the contentions of a wife are a continual dropping. So this is applied to fathers and sons, but school bus driver, student, the same type of, you can apply the principle very easily. It would have been a calamity. It would have been a disaster if I would have just let it go. They would have brought me to shame. Because guess what? Someday, maybe I'll get sick and I can't drive my route, and a substitute gets on that route, and the kids are a madhouse. And guess what? What does that look like on me? That guy's a worthless piece of garbage. He can't keep control of a bunch of kids. Proverbs 29 and verse 15. It says, the rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child left to himself bringeth his mother to shame. The next thing is to be utterly consistent. This is so important. I've found bus driving or parenting or being a teacher or whatever, any person in authority over children. As a bus driver, if I have to yell at a student one day for something and then I let it go the next day, I'm going to lose his respect and his obedience. Right? You can't, you're going to be real hard one day and then the next day you're just like, I just don't feel like yelling at him. Guess what? They're going to lose respect for you. And they're going to see that you're not consistent. Same way with parenting. If I get lazy and let bad behavior go, the students are going to capitalize on it. And if you give them an inch, they take a mile. And they'll keep pushing. They'll see what they can get away with. I don't know if they do it on purpose or subliminally, maybe both, but they keep pushing. They want to see where the line is. If I fail to correct bad behavior because I'm tired and I don't feel like it, the students will get out of control. So I must consistently correct bad behavior, and when I do, there will be very little bad behavior to correct. That's the thing. If you do it right, and you do it early, and you do it consistently, you don't have to do it very much, right? Because you get off on the right foot to start with. Number 8. 8. There you go. Do not make threats that you will not follow through with. This is bus driving, teachers, parents, anybody. Do not make threats that you do not fully intend on following through with. I've seen this so many times. If you do that, I'll ground you for a month. You liar, you know full well you won't ground him for a month. If you do that, you're not going to grandma's house. Liar, you know darn well he's going to grandma's house no matter what he does. Don't ever make a threat you won't follow through with. I never tell a student that I'm going to write him up a conduct report the next time he does something if I do not fully intend on doing so. I'm very careful with my words. I never tell him I'm going to write you up if I do not fully intend on writing him up. Never say, I'm going to write this whole bus up, unless you are actually going to write up all 40 students. Don't say that, because you will instantly lose their respect. When I tell a student that he'll be written up if he does something forbidden again, I always write him up when I get back to the bus garage, even if I don't feel like it, or even if I feel bad doing so. I had one boy, I told him that he had been jumping around and snapping people with his rubber band and moving seats, and I told him, if you move out of the seat one more time, I'm going to write you up. And I think he must have jumped, when he tried to do it when I wasn't looking, and he jumped into another seat and came back, maybe just to grab something. And I thought, I'm writing him up. And then when I got back, I thought, maybe he was just trying to grab something, and I thought, nope, I said I'm going to write him up, I'm going to write him up. Best thing I ever did. That kid's a lot better now. And you know what? I got a note from his mother. If you have trouble with this boy, you call me. Yep. You can tell the kids that have good parents, because when you get on them, they behave. The kids that don't have good parents, they don't have anything to worry about when they get home. Those in authority, including parents, should never issue an order or a threat that they do not fully intend on following through with. If you don't follow through with threats, your children will soon realize that you are not to be taken seriously. I'd say there are two main areas where parents fail in training and disciplining their children. This would go for bus drivers and teachers and anybody else as well. Two main things. I was just thinking about this today. Number one, they do not follow through with commands and threats. I see this all the time. I see parents all the time telling their children to do something or not do something, only to watch their children pay no attention to them. They tell their children that they will be spanked or otherwise punished if they don't obey, but then they don't follow through with the punishment the first time the child doesn't obey. It's pitiful. And when you tell your child to do something or don't do something, I mean, you should mean what you say, and when they do it or don't do it, it should be a spanking or whatever the punishment is right then and there the first time. The second thing is that they are not consistent with punishment. They'll punish an offense one day and then leave it slide the next day because they're tired. And that's the other thing. And then the kids, they don't know where the line is. It works the same way, parenting or bus driving, either way. This is why their children don't take them seriously when they tell them to do something. You see, the children are always looking for where the line in the sand is. They want to know where the line is, and they'll go right up to the line. But if the line is movable, and yesterday it was back here, and tomorrow it doesn't appear to be back here, I'm going to keep pushing because I want to find out where that line is, right? If the line is immovable, steadfast, right, like carved in concrete, they know where it is, and they're not going to be pushing.
That's the only way it's fair to the kids, too.
It's the only way what?
It's not fair to the kids if they don't
Right.
know where it is.
Right, exactly. That's exactly right. It's not fair to them. When the line continues to move, children continue to push, test, and challenge until they find the line. That's what they do. Next principle, smite the scorner and the simple will beware. Proverbs 19 and verse 25. See, because usually all it takes, you got a couple of kids that are usually the rabble-rousers, and you go in there and crack some skulls, and the other ones are like, whoa, I'm not messing with this guy because he's serious. You don't have to crack 40 skulls. You just got to crack one, and then the other ones say, I'm not messing with him. Proverbs 19 and verse 25. And of course, I speak in parables when I mention cracking skulls. Although I would like to do it literally sometimes. Proverbs 19 and verse 25. Smite a scorner, and the simple will beware. And reprove one that hath understanding, and he will understand knowledge. You see, the simple, they may be simple, but they can see, I just saw a skull get cracked. I don't want my skull to get cracked. And then they take it, and then they don't push. Those in authority must make an example out of the first rebel that rises up against them. That's what you got to do. You got to make an example of the first one. Proverbs 20 and verse 26. Proverbs 20:26. A wise king scattereth the wicked and bringeth the weal over them. That's what you got to do. You just, because if, a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. And if you don't crush the rebellion right away, then it's going to infect a bunch of people. So you just got to make an example out of the first one. When you do that, the others are going to see and fear, like Paul taught in 1 Timothy 5 and verse 20. 1 Timothy 5 and verse 20. See, I'm so glad I got this bus driving job because it gives me like real world experience dealing with this kind of thing, and it's really been interesting, challenging and interesting. 1 Timothy 5 and verse 20. Them that sin rebuke before all, that others may fear. See, when you tell somebody, you look at them, you say, if you do that again, I'm going to write you up. And then you write them up and word gets around, before you know it, they know that this guy means what he says. And I have proof of it, and I will read you the proof in just a minute. You'll get a kick out of this. But that's towards the end, which is not too far away. Here's another one. If you contend with them, you will have no rest. Do not contend with children. Do not argue with children. Punish children. Don't argue with them. And if you argue with them, you're going to lose as well. I mean, you might ultimately prevail when you do the right thing, but you're going to lose when you argue. Proverbs 29:9. I learned this one the hard way. Proverbs 29 and verse 9. Proverbs 29 and verse 9. If a wise man contendeth with a foolish man, whether he rage or laugh, there is no rest. Foolishness is bound in the heart of a children. Children are fools by nature. If you contend with fools, whether you rage or laugh, you will not have rest. You can't contend with children.
Does contend mean argue?
Argue.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. You can't argue with them.
Right.
When they
But
get
you
when
won't
they,
win.
you won't win. When you get older, you can reason. When they get older, you can reason with them. But even then, I wouldn't have a fight where you're screaming back and forth. You rage or laugh, you're not gonna have any rest. I've tried arguing with a student and tried to verbally force him to do something, and it doesn't work. The reason it doesn't work is because I was trying to verbally force him to do something. I can't lay my hands on him. If I could have solved the problem right then and there, but I can't, right? And they know that. A strong-willed student knows that today a bus driver cannot physically touch him, and therefore he will not back down and be humiliated in front of his friends. He will not back down. The strong-willed ones, right? The compliant ones will, that you won't even get into it with them. But the strong-willed ones, they will not back down, because to do so is to lose face in front of their friends, and that's all they've got. They'll go to the bitter end, and they will just be absolutely defiant. 70 years ago, a student would have either gotten a good beating, or he would have known that one was coming from the principal and his parents, and therefore the verbal confrontation probably wouldn't have even happened at all. But it's different today. Since we live in an ungodly society which doesn't allow such things, we must use less effective methods. But there are still effective methods. They're just less effective. Instead of arguing, just warn him of the consequences of disobedience if he rebels. This goes with your kids or anybody else. The consequences are going to be different with your kids. You just spank him right then and there. In this case, you warn him of the consequences. I'm going to write you up, and you're going to get a talking to. And if you do it again, I'm going to write you up again, and your parents are going to get involved. And if you do it again, I'm going to write you up again, and you're going to be off the bus for 10 days. And if you do it again, you're going to be off the bus for 20 days. And if you do it again, you're going to be off the bus permanently. And I will win. I will keep writing you up until you are not a problem for me anymore, if I have to. Or you can just be smart and wise and just stop and do what you're supposed to do. And we'll be at peace. There you go. That's all you got to do. When he rebels, you apply the punishment repeatedly and consistently until he complies. In my case, like I said, this means writing him up, getting parents and school administrators involved. And this worked when I did it, and it'll work for you too. Because I had a kid, he was going to get off at the wrong stop because he wanted to walk across the highway because instead of riding the bus for another half an hour. And I told him he wasn't getting off. Well, he told me he was getting off. Well, I said, I'll write you up. Well, he got off, and I wrote him up. And then he got off the next day, and I wrote him up. And guess what? The next day, he stayed on the bus. And every day after that, he stayed on the bus because he got a talking to. And his parents probably said, we are not driving you to school. And if you get kicked off of that bus, you're in big trouble. That's all you got to do. Number 11, don't be their friend. Those in authority, including parents, teachers, and bus drivers, make a grave mistake when they try to be their child or their student's friend. Don't be their friend. And I will qualify what I'm saying here. I'm not saying to be mean to them. I act courteously and respectfully toward my students, but I do not act like their friend. I'm not their buddy, right? Parents should not be their buddies to their children, at least not all the time. I mean, I'm not saying you can't play in roughhouse and be buddies there, but you shouldn't be a buddy to them all the time. You should be an authority to them. They need to view me as one in authority over them, not as their buddy. Like I said, parents need to remember this too. Once a leader's authority has been thoroughly established, he can then become friendly with his subordinates to the extent that they can handle it. So once you've established the authority, then you can be friendly. And if they can handle it, you can be more friendly. If they start to not be able to handle it, then you become less friendly. Right? You were friends with your company, not your commander, but your first sergeant, right? And you could handle it.
Advice he ever gave me.
Yep.
When I was becoming a sergeant, he said it's easier no matter what type of group of people you're dealing with. Come in hard, make people toe the line, and you can let up later. If you come in soft, it's too late.
Right.
You've already blown it.
That's exactly right.
You have to come in hard.
That's exactly right.
It's a lot easier to let up.
It is. Yes, it is. Number 12, resist the desire to be liked by them. Right? And this sounds like, oh, what do I care if kids like me? You'll care. If you're a decent person, you will care because you don't like not being liked by somebody. And I would have thought that, what do I care if these kids like me? Believe it or not, when I perceive that they don't like me, there's something in me where I just feel like, it kind of hurts. Like, why don't they like me? But you know what? I can't care if they like me. I think they'll like me later. They don't really like me yet. And I got the proof of it. I will share this with you. As a bus driver, I have felt the desire to be liked by my students, and when I feel that some of them don't like me, it does hurt a bit. But I and any other person in authority over kids, like parents or grandparents or teachers, must resist that desire to be liked. We must first be respected by them, and eventually they will like us. If we try to make them like us before they respect us, we will be neither liked or respected, right? They must respect you before they like you.
You know, when I was growing up, when my kids came along, I really didn't care whether they liked me or not, because that was the way it was when I was growing up.
Yep.
No adults cared if kids liked them.
Yeah.
The neighbor lady didn't care. The neighbor lady would come out and spank you if you did something
Yeah.
in her yard that
Yeah.
was wrong. They didn't.
Yeah.
They just didn't care.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah,
You probably-
it was good.
You probably liked the neighbor lady eventually, right?
Well, most of them would also give you cookies and things
Yeah, if you
too,
behaved
you know,
yourself.
if you were behaving
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
So
Right.
yeah, you did get so you liked them, but
But you've got to respect them first.
right.
Right now, my students aren't too happy with me, but they nevertheless obey my rules. They don't like me, but they obey my rules. I gave them a survey to fill out just yesterday. When I asked if I could do this, the lady at the garage, she just looked at me like I had two heads. She's like, well, you can if you want. Like, she's like, you're crazy. Why would you do that? Because when you give students a survey to fill out, I mean, it's going to be nasty, right? So I gave them a survey. So I gave them the questions, and you can have strongly agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. Okay, I have lumped together strongly agree and agree, those responses together. And I have also lumped together neutral, disagree, and strongly disagree. Because when I ask these questions, for instance, my school bus driver drives safely. If they're neutral, that tells me they don't think I drive safely, right? Because if I drove safely, they'd agree, right? So neutral, disagree, and strongly disagree are all together. So here are the questions. Question number one, or statement number one. My school bus driver drives safely. 11 agree, 14 disagree.
They just want to let you know.
Oh yeah. They some of them don't like me. Question number two, or statement number two. My school bus driver is always on time. 10 agree, 14 disagree.
Which is a lie.
Yeah, I am always, unless there's construction or something, I am on time, always.
Did they think that this was going like back to the bus barn?
I think some of them did. I think some of them,
Probably they were trying to get you fired.
that could be. I think some of them, thought that this was a survey from the bus barn. I didn't tell them any otherwise. I wanted them to think that. Number three, my school bus driver is friendly and courteous. 8 agree, 17 disagree. Me, an affable guy like me. They don't think I'm friendly and courteous. Can you believe that? I was shocked.
Yeah, right.
I was not.
Conduct slips for them.
I greet them. I'm serious. I greet them. Every single student that comes on that bus, I greet them good morning every single morning. Every single one, every single time. And I usually greet them when they leave as well. But they don't think I'm friendly and courteous. Now, question number 4. I should have read this one first. Question number 4, the answer to that will determine the answer to the rest. Okay, so if question number 4 is agree, the rest of them are going to be disagree. If question number 4 is disagree, then the rest are going to be agree, I think. Question number 4. My school bus driver maintains order on the bus. Okay? Listen to this. 14 agree, 11 disagree. The majority of them agree that the school bus driver maintains order on the bus. He's not friendly, he's not courteous, he's a terrible driver, and he never shows up on time, but he maintains order on this bus.
Can I ask what age group this was?
This is high school, middle school. Yep, so 6th grade, 6th to 12th grade. Question number 5. My school bus driver is fair and impartial when dealing with students. You're never going to guess. 9 agree, 16 disagree.
You got trouble with 16 students.
Yeah, apparently. Question number 6. My school bus driver acts professionally. 11 agree, 14 disagree or neutral. Question number 7. I feel safe and secure on the school bus. 11 agree, 14 disagree or neutral. One said in her comment that she feels secure on the school bus but not safe. Whatever that means. So. Mind you, I mean, there is no bullying going on in this bus. There's nothing. I would not tolerate that for a second. I mean, there's no way that any of these kids don't feel safe. I mean, obviously, you got to take anything that a middle schooler says with a grain of salt. I mean, pretty much, obviously. Question number 8. You'll like this one. My overall impression of my school bus driver is that he is, okay, first one is excellent. 4 of them thought that. Second one, good. 6 of them thought that. Just okay, 9 of them. Terrible, 2. And a total jerk, 4. So, I mean, not too bad. I had 10 good and excellent, so, you know,
And
not
just
horrible.
okay.
And 9 just okay. And then I gave them a place where they could comment as well. And I just give you a few comments here. This one was actually spoken to me when I handed the thing out. The girl circled strongly disagree on every one and handed it back to me and said, I don't like you. Yeah. 2 students said the same thing. I want our old bus driver back. One of them says, you're the best bus driver. I assume that was spoken in jest. I don't know.
His
But
answer was funny. It's like he strongly disagree, and then he wrote excellent. By the
yeah.
end.
Yeah, which is odd. But. And then one little girl, this is my favorite comment of all. She says, he's very nice, but we have a stronger chance of getting written up. And that's exactly the way I want it. He's very nice, but if we try anything, we're going to get it written up. That's the way I like it.
She knows where the line is.
Yep.
Yep.
Because I had to get on her. I didn't write her up, but I had to get on her one time. And they may eventually come to like me, but in the meantime, I will have a quiet, calm, peaceful, and safe bus ride to and from school. Maybe they'll like me, maybe they won't. But I'm more concerned about getting them safely to and from school and having a peaceful ride.
I'll bet you there's kids on that bus that have been bullied, and they're the ones that you got the good comments from.
It could be.
And the ones that have been having fun doing the bullying aren't having fun anymore.
That could be. There was one girl, whenever I first introduced myself and I read the rules and then I said that I'll respect you and you respect me. And when I was reading the rules, this one girl, she was nodding her head the whole time. I could tell she was a decent girl. And then when I handed these things out and I said, just when you're done, pass them forward. And I could hear, in the back there, I could hear some of them crinkling them up and all this stuff. And the girl said, this was a bad idea. She's like, we just have a bunch of idiots on this bus and they're going to, So anyway. And lastly, I'm nice to them even when they're not nice to me. Like I said, I greet each student every time they get on the bus and usually also when they get off the bus. The majority of the students do not greet me back. Some of them do, and it's getting to be where more of them do, but most of them, they don't say anything. I say good morning, they just keep walking. They won't even, it's weird. But yeah, the majority of them don't. But I must not render rudeness for rudeness. Look at 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 15. 1 Thessalonians 5:15. The temptation's there to just say, you know what, I'm not greeting them anymore. Tack with them. But you know what, I'm just going to keep greeting them. I'm going to keep saying good morning. And maybe eventually it'll rub off on them. 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 15. See that none render evil for evil unto any man, but ever follow that which is good, both among yourselves and to all men. So not just among the church, to all men. Don't render evil for evil. You know what? If they're rude to me, I'm not going to be rude to them back. And the thing was, when I got the results, you could put your name on it optionally if you wanted to. And I was surprised the amount of kids that put their name on it and circled strongly disagree for all those things and say how terrible I am, and yet they put their name on it. But a lot of them didn't. But I guess that tells me that they at least know me well enough to know that I'm not going to retaliate against them. Because I don't. As a matter of fact, the little girl that told me that she doesn't like me, I make it a point to say hi to her every morning. And who knows what'll happen. But they know that I don't treat them any differently. As a matter of fact, I got a kick out of it. I think it was funny. Like the worse the responses were, the funnier I thought it was. And I don't hold it against them whatsoever. They're kids, I used to be one too. I hope to eventually teach them to be courteous and polite by way of example. So we'll see if that works or not. But anyway, so that's what I've learned here driving a bus for a few weeks, and I hope maybe you learned something from it too.